Sam Mayer has been suspended for the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Phoenix Raceway, and Judge Kenneth Bell has dismissed the counterclaim against NASCAR, and a chance of settlement is increasing between NASCAR 20-11 and Front Row. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and our Motorsports story discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight on those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Williams' 2025 Optum scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. Love the look of this car, to be honest. I think the Optum schemes have looked really good this year when he's driven for this car. This one's no exception. It looks pretty good. Looking forward to on the racetrack at Phoenix. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Luke Baldwin's 2025 Flex Fuel scheme that we'll see on Friday night at Phoenix. I love the simplicity of this truck, to be honest, and I think the sponsorship placement on the truck is actually really good. It looks solid. Love the colors on the truck. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Parker Redslash 2025 Visual Pack scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. This has Green Bay packaging on there as well. I love the Green Bay look to it, kind of like the Green Bay Packers logo we see a lot of times. I think this one looks really solid, and I think it's a nice looking car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Joe Logano's 2026 Shell Pennzoil scheme that we'll see in majority of races next year. There's not many changes to this one from the prior years, to be honest, but I do like the consistency of it, to be honest, and it does give a consistent look that we've seen for quite some time. It does look solid, and I think it does look pretty good. Maybe not as strong as 24 or 23, but I think it is a solid one for sure. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brendan Queen's 2025 Leaf Filter scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. We'll talk about Kaulig Racing near the end of the episode, but it's an iconic Leaf Filter gutter scheme that we have seen for Kaulig Racing for many years. I think this one actually does look solid. The colors on it look really good. They nailed the throwback look to this one. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jack Wood's 2025 Columbia Bank scheme that we'll see on Friday night at Phoenix. Love the look of this truck, to be honest. I think it's actually a solid looking truck for sure. McAnally's had some nice looking trucks throughout the year. This one does look good, and I think it's pretty solid. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Eric Jones' 2025 Ziploc Dollar Tree scheme that we'll see this weekend at Phoenix. Out of all the Dollar Tree schemes that we have seen so far this year, this actually is my favorite one that we have seen in the last couple years. I love the simplistic look to this car. You've got the all blue. You've got Ziploc on the front of the car. They did a fantastic job on design for this paint scheme. It is incredible. It looks amazing. It's one of my favorite paint schemes I think I've seen so far this year. I think it just looks simplistic, but there's nothing wrong with that, to be honest. Simplicity can't always be a bad thing. I think it's a solid looking car for sure. Looking forward to on the racetrack this weekend at Phoenix. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jack Crawford. As it was announced earlier today that Jack Crawford will be the third driver at Aston Martin in 2026 and will be the reserve driver for the program next year. Jack Crawford has been, I believe, one of the reserve drivers and one of the development guys under the Aston Martin program, has been competing in Formula 2 so far this year, has had a solid chance and opportunity to win the championship, and has been really competitive in Formula 2 this season. I think Jack Crawford does have a lot of talent and a ton of potential, and obviously I think long-term he could be a future driver for Aston Martin. Depends on how much longer Fernando Alonso does race for the program, or if Lance Stroll at some point is going to be let go of that seat, because at this point, if I was an organization, I probably would at this point just get rid of Lance Stroll and put Jack Crawford in the car, because Jack Crawford's probably going to get you more results at this point than Lance Stroll is going to get you at this point. But obviously the big reason why Lance Stroll's in that car in the first place is because his father, Lawrence Stroll, owns Aston Martin. So while I think that we should see Jack take over that seat in the future, I think Jack deserves to be in Formula 1 at this point. He's a solid guy for sure. Hope he does long-term get the chance to go to Formula 1 sometime in 2027. He's earned the right opportunity to get that chance. We'll see what happens, and we'll see if down the road he'll get that opportunity to go to Formula 1 in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the front row. As it was reported, I believe, by the NASCAR Insights account earlier today or yesterday, that with William Byron winning from the pole at Martinsville this past week, drivers starting on the front row have won the last 4 races in the NASCAR Cup Series. This is the first time that this has happened since the summer of 1985. When you think about all the drivers who won poles in NASCAR Cup Series history, the fact that this is the first time in 40 years that we've had 4 consecutive races with drivers winning the pole, or at least on the front row, I think that's absolutely an incredible accomplishment. And it shows that with this next-gen car, qualifying has mattered a lot more this year. I think in almost half the races so far this year, or even more at this point, you've had to start near the front or start on the front row. And if you have a fast enough car, you can get that chance and opportunity to go to victory lane. And I think it's been so impressive to see the consistency of some drivers so far as well. So I think it's a pretty interesting stat for sure, and interesting that we've seen more drivers win from the front row in the first couple positions on the grid. Really solid stuff, and I think it's a pretty impressive stat from the NASCAR drivers, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to ahead and jump on to the next story in today's episode, as we're talking about Stefan Parsons. As it was announced earlier today that Stefan Parsons will drive the number 35 for Joey Gase Motorsports this weekend at Phoenix. I do believe that Stefan Parsons has made a start so far with the Joey Gase Motorsports team so far this year, but he's also made a couple NASCAR Xfinity Series starts in the number 5 and also number 45 for Alpha Prime Racing this season. I think Stefan Parsons is an incredibly underrated driver. We saw what he could do at times last year with the Henderson Motorsports organization and in the Craftsman Truck Series of Young's Motorsports so far, team he's competed with quite a bit this season. He's done a pretty solid job behind the wheel. I think the 7 will have a solid chance for a top 30 in the event, though, because Joey Gase Motorsports is not the fastest organization out there. But I do think he's going to have a solid chance and opportunity to show some decent competitive stuff. I think he's going to have a pretty good run this weekend for sure. We'll see how he does this weekend at Phoenix. We'll talk about him here just a short little bit. But nonetheless, I think it's a great opportunity. Glad to see the Stefan Parsons is getting the chance and opportunity to drive the 35 car this weekend at Phoenix. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story in today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, many of you probably saw this thing going on social media over the course of the last day or so, but Kyle Busch and Samantha Busch released a video on a scam that they unfortunately kind of got sadly involved in a little bit, and they kind of were victims of a scam that involved insurance companies and insurance claims. This company is associated with Pacific Life that I believe was selling off a lot of things, and apparently Kyle Busch and Samantha are suing this company due to this basically losing lots of money. They were investing toward the future for not just them, but their daughter and their son, and they were investing for the future of their family, and they lost apparently a lot of money. Sounds like from what they said, they might have lost millions of dollars in this situation. I hate that for Kyle, but they mentioned this in the video. It's not just Kyle Busch or Samantha or people that are higher up athletes have millions of dollars. A lot of people do unfortunately get affected by this kind of stuff. They do get affected by insurance companies, and they do get unfortunately affected by a lot of these investor companies as well. And it's really incredibly unfortunate to see something like this happen to Kyle and Samantha. They're two really good people. They work hard in this industry. They want to make this world a better place in general, and I hate to see that they unfortunately got screwed in this situation right here. This will probably be a very interesting case to kind of follow, because again, it looks like they'll be suing the company. I would expect they have a really good chance to win. They're looking for a lot of that money back. I didn't read the whole court article that they put out, but I have to kind of read to see how much money they're asking for. But it sounds like they may be asking for a lot of money at this point. Hopefully they're able to get their money back that they lost and can get that money back so they can have it back in the future, so they can invest it toward their kids' future going forward here relatively soon. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Leland Honeyman Jr. As it was announced earlier today that Leland Honeyman Jr. will be going full-time in ARCA in the 2026 season, as he'll drive the number 20 car for Nitro Motorsports. Remember, going into next year, Nitro Motorsports has bought the Venturini Motorsports team and organization, and all the parts in Venturini Motorsports are being moved into Nitro Motorsports for next year. Leland Honeyman, of course, is driven for a team called Kaulig Racing Family. Nick Tucker, who is one of the owners of the Kaulig Racing Family team, he also owns Nitro Motorsports and one of the higher-ups at Nitro Motorsports as well. So this move is not shocking and surprising. This is going to be the best opportunity Leland Honeyman Jr. has had in his racing career up to this point. I think Leland is a very talented guy who has at times gotten the best out of equipment. I remember when he drove for Young's Motorsports and ARCA East as well, and was super fast and super competitive in those series. And I think he will be really strong next year in 2026. Because you look at next year, you're not going to likely have Rev Racing in 2026. Venturini is going to be gone next year. Yes, you're going to have the 18 car be really competitive from Joe Gibbs Racing. You're going to have the 28 car from Pinnacle Racing Group be competitive. But it's unknown if there's going to be a full-time driver that's been been a new rumor circulating that Laney Bice might be driving part-time for the program, though she'll probably be back with the car store in some way, shape, or form next year, which we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. But this is going to be a really solid opportunity for Leland. I think he's going to be very competitive, and I expect Leland to go to victory lane in the main ARCA series next year. So I'm excited for Leland. This is a great and solid opportunity, and again, I hope he is fast and really competitive in this series, because I think ARCA needs a lot of competitive drivers. They need to bring a lot of competition in the series, so the more competitive teams we can have, the better it is for the sport. We'll see how things go, but it's going to be a good opportunity for Leland. Hope we can have a really strong and really good season with Nitro Motorsports in 2026. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Cars Tour. As it was announced early this morning that the 2026 Cars Tour schedule has been officially unveiled. The season is going to kick off at Coastal Plains on February 21st. After that, they'll race at Southern National Park on February 28th. Then they'll race at Wake County on March 28th. And then they'll race at Nashville Fairgrounds on April 11th. After that, they'll race at Caraway on April 25th. And then they'll race at Ace Speedway on May the 9th. After that, they'll race at Langley on May 30th. And then they'll race at Dominion on June 13th. After that, there'll be about a month-long break, and then they'll race in North Wilkesboro on July 17th, followed by race in Hickory on August 8th. After that, they'll head at Anderson Motor Speedway on August 22nd, and they'll race at Florence Speedway on September the 4th. Then they'll race at Tri-County on September the 12th, and they'll race at Newport on October 3rd, and the final race of the season will take place at South Boston on October 17th. The big thing, with the schedule next year, there is no repeat tracks on the schedule. Every single track will get one day in 2026. So if you're planning to go to any Cars Tour races next year, you only get one shot opportunity to go to each of those tracks. I think North Wilkesboro did have 2 races last year, but they took a date away. And there's some other tracks that did lose a day for 2026 as well. But there's also some new tracks, I believe, that are on the schedule for 2026. The Cars Tour always puts on fantastic and really, really good racing. And I do expect that to continue going into 2026 as well. So I think it's a very solid schedule in general. Short track scene is really in a good position, really in good hands in my opinion, and I think it's exciting to see the Cars Tour schedule officially out and revealed for 26. I think it is definitely a solid schedule, and there's some good tracks on the schedule for 2026 as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Wayne Taylor Racing and Cadillac. As it was announced early this morning that the 2026 lineup has been officially revealed for both their cars for the endurance races in 2026. Beginning with the number 10 car, it'll be Will Stevens, Ricky Taylor, and Philippe Albuquerque in 2026. For the number 40 car, the second car in the program, it's going to be Colton Herta, who will drive in select races in this car next year, Jordan Taylor, and Luis Delatraz. This is a really strong lineup going into 2026. You're going to see Colton Herta, of course, a lot more going into next year, because Colton Herta, of course, is no longer driving IndyCar 2026. He, of course, is working with the team in Formula 1 as a reserve driver, of course, going to Formula 2 with High Tech Motorsports next year, which there'll be some opportunities to run in the IMSA series next year. But these will be the lineups also for the races, and of course the lineups for the Rolex 24 at Daytona as well. A lot of other teams are expected to start announcing their plans. I do believe the Cadillac Whelen team also announced their lineup for 2026, which I think is going to be the same lineup they had in 2025. But I think this is a really strong and good core lineup. Now, I would also expect some other drivers to be candidates to make starts in these cars. Maybe Kamui Kobayashi gets behind the wheel. Maybe we see someone from the IndyCar side like a Kyle Kirkwood get behind the wheel, though he might end up driving for the Lexus AMG team once again in the lower class, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But I think, again, this is a very solid lineup for the Wayne Taylor Racing team in those races. I think they've got a strong core lineup for next year. I love the lineup they got, and I think that there's a chance that these guys can all go to victory lane. We'll see how things go, and we'll see if Wayne Taylor Racing can show some really strong pace and really good speed next year, and see if they can kind of get back to where they were a couple years ago and can compete for the title and championship. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Stefan Parsons. As it was announced yesterday that Stefan Parsons will drive the number 7 truck for Spire Motorsports this weekend at Phoenix. So Stefan Parsons will be doing double duty this weekend at Phoenix. As we already mentioned, he'll run the NASCAR Xfinity Series race for Joey Gates Motorsports, and we'll get a really good chance and opportunity to join up with Spire Motorsports. While Spire Motorsports may have not been as fast as they've been the last couple years in the Craftsman Truck Series, they're still a really strong team. This is going to be the best opportunity that Stefan Parsons has had in his NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series career. He's been very competitive with smaller teams in this series, and I think 7 does have a ton of promise and ton of potential to be really strong and good next year. And I expect him to be very fast and really competitive in the races next year in this season, because I think he's got a really good shot here to be really strong. The 7 truck show really good speed with Brendan Queen in the truck race at Martinsville. And of course, we've seen some really competitive stuff come from that team. We've seen the 7 truck go to victory lane with Kyle Busch and Carson Hocevar this season. And Kyle Larson also won the 07 truck, which went over to the 77 truck. So I do think 7 will have a pretty fast and really good opportunity to be really strong and good enough to have an opportunity. I think he will have a good shot for a top 10, maybe even a top 15 be the minimum score, but I think a top 10 is realistically possible because Spire has shown some good stuff at this track before. Again, I think there's a strong opportunity for him this weekend. I think he's going to have a good opportunity to be really good. He could be good in both races. Who knows at this point, but a good opportunity for 7. We'll see how he does, and we'll see if he can do really good this weekend at Phoenix. Excited to see how things go for him coming up this weekend at Phoenix for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series event. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR 25. As it was announced early this afternoon that NASCAR 25 has a new event that will be going on the virtual side of things. But they announced that they will have a new creator series that will be taking place starting effectively today. 8 of the top streamers on Twitch and I believe YouTube as well will be involved with this. This includes Tim the Tapman, Courage JD, Your Rage, Emaru, Sable Ronaldo, I believe Extra Emily, and a couple other big streamers that many of you will recognize if you are in the streamer game. And also Agent will also be part of this as well. Now, I did see a lot of the NASCAR creators that are involved with this game who talk about this game saying, why couldn't we be involved in this? And I saw a lot of people basically saying, why couldn't we get someone like a Michael Marutz? Why couldn't we get Gary Owen to be in the game? Well, while I do understand that those people are really big, they're not big world in the big side of things. They're not as big as like some of these big creators. The reason that NASCAR has this creator series with these 8 streamers is these 8 streamers have massive audiences. Some of these people get 40 to 50,000, even 100,000 people watching their streams. Those are going to give the opportunity for some of their fans, especially that are a lot younger, to potentially tune in to NASCAR races. This could convert some of those fans to play NASCAR 25, which if you play NASCAR 25, from what a lot of people say, it's a fantastic and really, really good game. And I think having these creators come in who maybe are not as versed in NASCAR as other people, having these people come in and play can really give the opportunity to get that younger demographic. NASCAR really needs to market this and get the younger demographic to be involved in the sport. NASCAR's really been struggling on that, especially when you look at the ratings for TV. And we need to get that younger demographic to tune into the sport. So I think something like this is actually really good, and I think this is going to be fun to definitely tune in. I'm probably going to tune into it for sure to see how things go. You've got 8 really big name creators and some exciting stuff for sure. It's going to be a cool series they're having with NASCAR 25. I love seeing new ambitions. For people complaining, I think, yes, we do need to get some of the NASCAR creators to have the chance and opportunity to do something like this, but they got the opportunity to go out to try the game. But I think Creator Series is a cool idea, and I think it's definitely a solid idea that they've got, and I think it's actually something that I'm really going to be loving, and I think it's something that I think a lot of fans are generally going to enjoy. I think it's something really cool they're doing, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rising. As it was announced on Monday morning that NASCAR will have a new docuseries that will be starting effectively on November 17th in about 2 or 3 weeks from now. The new docuseries is going to be called Rising. It's going to be a 5-part docuseries that's going to focus on 3 upcoming drivers in the NASCAR divisions. It will have Carson Hocevar, Jesse Love, and Roger Caruth. 1 driver representing each series for 2025. Now, these 3 drivers are 3 of the top upcoming drivers in the sport. Carson Hocevar currently competes in the NASCAR Cup Series, has a pretty big personality, and is someone that you can definitely market around for sure. Even Carson Hocevar was like a hurricane this past weekend in Martinsville. Carson Hocevar does have a good personality, and I think he's going to be someone that can help on that front, and I think he'll be able to show a lot of stuff on the reality side of things. For Jesse Love, makes a ton of sense. Jesse Love is someone that I think really wants to help grow the sport as well. And I think he does have a personality, especially when he hangs out with Connor Zilisch, which we're probably going to see Connor Zilisch quite a bit. But Connor Zilisch, of course, is a big star. And then Raja Karuf. Raj Karuf is someone who a lot of people are really high in the industry. I'm a big fan of Raja Karuf, and I think Raja's done a lot for the sport to try to help, and of course we'll go to Junior Motorsports next year in the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series. But the big thing is marketing your young superstars. This is something that NASCAR has been struggling to do, is market the young superstars. This is going to give that chance and opportunity to market these young drivers. If you market them, you can have a chance to make new fans. The fans can become fans of these guys and talk about these guys a lot more consistently. So I love seeing this for sure. I think it's going to be a great docuseries that NASCAR is releasing. I love seeing a new docuseries that NASCAR is releasing. I think it's going to be a really fun and cool docuseries to check out for sure, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joe Gibbs. Now, in a Zoom call this past week on Monday, there's been a lot of talk and conversation around Joe Gibbs Racing and some of the concerns around the engine issues and a lot of the part and mechanical issues that we've been seeing with Denny Hamlin, who, of course, is competing for a championship this weekend. There's been a ton of concerns around the Joe Gibbs Racing organization like there was last year. If you go back to last year, there was a lot of mechanical issues and mechanical gremlins that affected all 4 drivers from Joe Gibbs Racing that cost them a chance and opportunity in a big way to really compete for a championship because they lost a ton of momentum. Well, Joe Gibbs ensured in a Zoom call, and he says that the parts issues won't be an issue at Phoenix Raceway because they will have a different batch of parts that the next-gen car does provide, and they plan to have that batch delivered to everybody for the Joe Gibbs Racing side of things. This does help a little bit, kind of reset those concerns a little bit and get rid of some of those concerns for Joe Gibbs. But I think that's going to be on the back of mind of a lot of fans who are Joe Gibbs Racing. We have seen a ton of issues with Joe Gibbs Racing, especially with Denny Hamlin, for example. At Las Vegas Motor Speedway, the Racing 1, he had a shifter issue. I believe at Talladega, he had a starter issue and a stuck throttle that was 20% stuck because he got debris in the car. And then he had the engine issue at the most recent race in Martinsville. Same thing for the other Toyotas of Riley Herbst and Chase Briscoe. Chase Briscoe being another driver who basically is competing for a championship. Now, that could have been an experiment thing where they brought some experimental parts to try to test out. And I think that certainly is possibly something that could have happened in that situation for sure. But to me, that's something that they absolutely 100% have got to resolve before we get to Phoenix. Because if they don't resolve this issue before we get to Phoenix, it's very likely that Hendrick Motorsports is going to win their first title since 2021. Because while Hendrick Motorsports at times has had mechanical gremlins and mechanical issues, they have not had as many mechanical issues this year as Joe Gibbs Racing's had in the second half of this year. So to me, I think the best thing to do is try to resolve this before we do begin the race at this point. And it sounds like they're going to hopefully have this issue resolved, which is the best thing. So hopefully they resolve the issues. They can focus forward because they can't have this happening when they get to Phoenix. It sounds like maybe they resolved it, which will hopefully be something they've done at this point. Get the batch figured out, figure out what's exactly has been going on and what's been going wrong. Fix it and get prepared for the race at Phoenix because you've got a shot to win your first championship since 2019. We'll see if they don't have those issues, and we'll see if they don't creep up this weekend at Phoenix for Joe Gibbs Racing. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jesse Love. As it was announced earlier this evening that Jesse Love will be running the Supercars race and be at the Supercar event at the season finale at Adelaide at the end of November going into December. But he will not be competing in the top class. Instead, he'll be competing in the secondary series, which is technically the NASCAR Xfinity Series, the Super 2 Series sponsored by Dunlop, I believe for a team, can't remember, like Nitro or something like that, is a team that Jesse Love is going to be competing in. There, of course, have been rumors and speculation about some of the NASCAR drivers going over running the Supercar events. We all know that Connor Zilch was very close to having a deal signed to run the Supercar event at Adelaide and run the Grand Final. Unfortunately, that deal fell through because they couldn't get the deal officially done. And Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson have not gotten the chance and opportunity to run it because they both lost an opportunity to run it because Kyle Larson had issues at the Indy 500. We will see another driver on the NASCAR side going over and running that, of course, will be Austin Cindric, who will be competing with Tickford Racing, a team that's been really strong on the Ford side of things and were pretty fast and pretty competitive, especially in the most recent Bathurst 1000 and the Bathurst 12 Hours. I believe they're really competitive in that as well. But I think Jesse Love going over and improving his craft makes a ton of sense in my opinion. You need to go out there and try to get better, especially on road courses, because if you're going to want to beat the likes of Connor Zilch and Corey Heim, who's probably going to be in Xfinity some way, shape, or form next year, and other drivers, you want to have the opportunity to get better on road courses. So I really like this move for Jesse. Again, I think Jesse is going to be strong, and I think he's going to be pretty competitive in this event because Super 2 is not as strong as the top series. I think Jack Perkins might be in that, so Jack Perkins probably the favorite in the race if he's running, but I think it's going to be a strong lineup he's going to be going up against. I love seeing NASCAR drivers branch out, just like the supercar guys who've come over and raced, like, of course, like your Brock Feeney, who's rumored at one point, your Cam Waters is, your Will Browns, your other people like Chaz Mostert I'd love to see come over. I love seeing the crossover happening in NASCAR and love the NASCAR's going over and running drivers going over running supercar events. I think that's awesome to see, and I think that's great overall for the sport, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brandon McSwain. As it was confirmed and reported by Racer.com yesterday morning that Brandon McSwain will be the new crew chief for Ross Chastain in 2026, confirming that Phil Surgeon will not be the crew chief for Ross Chastain next year. Now, this move is definitely shocking and surprising. Brandon McSwain has been with Hendrick Motorsports for a long time. I think he was an engineer for either Chase Elliott or Kyle Larson at one point, and has been with Hendrick Motorsports in the Xfinity program, and I also believe that Brandon McSwain has won some Xfinity Series races at Hendrick Motorsports over the course of the last couple years. Why this is shocking is because Trackhouse Racing is not fully affiliated with Hendrick Motorsports. They're more affiliated with ECR. But I think this actually is an upgrade for Ross Chastain compared to Phil Surgeon. This is no disrespect to Phil Surgeon. I think Phil Surgeon is an all-right crew chief, but Phil Surgeon is not as good as Brandon McSwain. And I think Brandon McSwain is going to be able to give more of an opportunity for more speed to come, because one of the issues we see with Ross Chastain and Trackhouse Racing, especially on the ovals this year, is somewhat of the lack of speed. They have had issues getting speed in qualifying. Ross complained about that back in April, Texas Motor Speedway, and other drivers from Trackhouse have complained about the lack of speed that they have been seeing and receiving. So I think having a new crew chief come in who has experience at Hendrick Motorsports, who is the number one who's of course been the number one Chevy team for a very long time, having that team and someone from the organization like Hendrick coming in to help with that, I think that is a really, really big deal. And I think Brandon is going to probably do a really solid, really good job being the crew chief for Ross next year. I expect Ross to have maybe a shot at winning the championship. I think you look at Trackhouse next year. You're going to have Connor Zilch, Ross Chastain, and Shane Van Gisbergen, the best three-core lineup we have seen from Trackhouse since they basically became a two-car team. I think it's going to be a strong lineup next year, and I think Brandon McSwain is going to do a solid job as a crew chief. I really like this move. I think Brandon will do a pretty good job as a crew chief for Ross Chastain in 2026. Excited about this move. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tricon Garage. As it was announced yesterday morning that Tricon Garage has signed a multi-year extension with Toyota and will continue being the number one Toyota team in the Craftsman Truck Series for many, many years to come. The exact number of years was not disclosed, but we do know it's probably at least a 2 to 3 year deal. And my guess is it's probably like a half a decade deal, so probably 5 to 6 years is how long the deal is likely going to be for Tricon Garage to be the number one team. They have been the number one team for Toyota since Kyle Busch Motorsports left the Toyota stable at the end of 2022, and many of the big sponsors from KBM went over to work with the Tricon team. That, of course, includes some of the other sponsors like Safelight and a couple other companies that have worked with them, like JBL, also have gone over to work with Tricon over the last couple of years. Now, Tricon Garage has not officially announced what their lineup exactly is going to be for 26. We do know there's reports that Corey Hamm will likely not be back full-time with this program in 2026. He's going to likely be part-time with them, but not full-time next year. There's other unknowns exactly what's going to happen with the lineup. Gia Ruggiero, we do expect to be back with Tricon next, but that has not been officially confirmed. Tanner Gray is expected to be back from what I know, and there's some other unknowns. Tony Breidinger has been linked over to the Kaulig Racing Truck Series team for next year, so that is potentially something to look out for. Brent Cruz is maybe going to make some select starts with Tricon, but it's also expected that Brent is potentially going to go full-time with Joe Gibbs Racing once he turns 18. He'll probably do that in the Xfinity Series, and I think that he is a very talented kid, so I think he's got a ton of potential and someone who's shown a lot of promise, who will also be running the Truck Series race this weekend at Phoenix. But I think for Tricon it's going to be interesting. And then the big one, of course, Caden Honeycutt, who is expected, of course, to go full-time in the Truck Series next year, take over the 11th truck. And I think that will be a really good move for the team next year as well. So I'm very excited to see what the lineup exactly is going to be. But this partnership is a fantastic partnership, in my opinion. And I think it's going to be a great partnership long-term to see that Tricon will continue working with Toyota going forward. Because, of course, this was David Gillen Racing. They, of course, before had Ryan Priest and Haley Deegan, which has been rumors around her in the last couple months about her going to McAnally. We'll see what happens with their lineup for next year, but nothing's been officially announced and confirmed. I think there's still a lot of unknowns with that. We'll have to wait and see what happens, and we'll see who ends up driving for the program in 26, and we'll see what the lineup could end up being in the not so distant future, but it's great to see that the extension is continuing and the group will be continuing with Toyota long term. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey Heim and Connor Zilisch. Now, on the most recent Happy Harvick podcast that released earlier today or yesterday when you're watching this video, Kevin Harvick basically says something that I think many fans are going to agree with. He says that it would be very embarrassing for NASCAR if Corey Heim and or Connor Zilisch do not win the championships in their respective series. It would look really bad for the sport in general. It would be absolutely a disgrace to the sport if they both do not win their championships. Now, I 100% agree with Kevin Harvick on this. Now, of course, other drivers spoke on about it. Tyler Ingram had a funny comment saying that if I win the championship on Friday night, I'm probably not going to be on social media because I think he knows that it would be really bad look. And Ty Majeski even also kind of admitted that, yeah, Corey Heim has been absolutely the best driver without question, but there's one race and we can get it done and win the championship there. But Kevin Harvick is 100% right. If Corey Heim especially doesn't win the championship, you're not just going to have fans like myself that are going to be upset. But I think there's even going to be people in the industry, including drivers and including crew chiefs, among other things, that are going to be really angry if Corey Heim doesn't win the championship. And same thing goes for Connor Zilisch. On the Connor Zilisch side of things, it might not be as much backlash because Justin Allgaier is a very popular driver. And Justin Allgaier, to be fair, well, yes, he hasn't had the raw numbers when it comes to wins. He's actually been a lot closer to Connor Zilisch than people realize it. But the only guy, in my opinion, that I think there'll be at least some slight justification if they beat Zilisch. But if Corey Heim wins the title, doesn't win the title, there's no justifying it. He's got 11 wins. The rest of the drivers combined, career-wise, don't have as many wins as Corey Heim's had this season. Laps led, Corey Heim's led 1,525. The rest of them combined have led like 400 laps this year. And then the one guy who got in, Caden Honeycutt, got in off a tiebreaker, not by wins, by best finish, even though Lane Riggs has been better this year than Caden Honeycutt this season. I hope Corey Heim wins the championship on Friday, and I hope that Connor wins the championship on Saturday, because those, without question, are the two most deserving drivers to win their respective championships. But if they don't win their championships, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to be angry and upset. And I think if you're wanting the full season format to come back, you're probably hoping Heim and Zilisch don't win the championship so you can get the full season format, which, trust me, we're going to talk about that here in just a short little bit. But to me, I really hope that Heim and Zilisch win their respective titles. They both deserve to win their championships, in my opinion. And if it doesn't happen, there's going to be a lot of people, like I said, that are not going to be very happy. I hope they win their titles because, again, they deserve their championships without question. It would be an embarrassment for the sport, like Harvick said, if they don't win their championships. Heim and Zilisch have just been on different levels this year. They're two of the best prospects who are going to be Cup Series drivers in the future. We'll see what happens, though, on that front. But I hope that they win their championships because, like I said, they both deserved it and they both earned it with how good they've been. Don't disrespect the other drivers outside of maybe Justin Allgaier, but they don't deserve it more than those two drivers deserve it, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the championship format. Now, we already talked about the fact that Corey Heim and Connor Zilisch have to go into the one-race championship and probably should already have the championship, despite the fact that they both have been incredible in their respective series so far this year. Well, there continues to be a lot of talk about the championship format over the course of the last couple days. The big thing, it sounds like we're probably starting to narrow down on what options there could be for the championship formats for 2026. The one clear thing, as many people indicated, it sounds very likely that the one-race championship will not be a thing in 2026. So this will likely be the last time we'll have the one-race winner-take-all championship format, which I gotta say, anything is better than what we got right now, because a one-race championship is absolutely the worst way to crown a champion, and I don't think it's the way we should be crowning champions in the sport. So according to what Jordan Bianchi said, it's coming down to three options. This was, of course, on Door Bumper Clear. The first one is a four-race round. The 3-3-4 format that everyone has kind of discussed could be a potential possibility. The second option, which is starting to grow, is a 10-race chase. Now, NASCAR did have the 10-race chase from 2004 up until 2013, and they, of course, added a 13th member, that being Jeff Gordon, 2013 after whole debacle with Richmond. And they're supposed to go to that in 2015 when the new TV deal came in, but they went to it early with the elimination side of things. And then the full season format continues to be an option. Let's rank each of these, beginning with the worst. The 4-race round. Well, yes, it would be improvement over the one-race championship. I still think 4 races is not a big enough sample size, and I think you need to have a bigger sample size than 4 races, in my opinion. The 10-race chase, that would be a solid middle ground. I wouldn't be as livid and upset if we went to the 10-race chase. I grew up with the 10-race chase. And I think while 10-race is not perfect, the regular season is going to matter a lot. And of course, the other big thing is you'll have a big enough sample size in the postseason / playoffs. The big thing you have to do, though, you can't have 16 cars in the playoffs. You got to have 12. That's the maximum you can have. We're going to have a postseason any way, shape, or form. And call it the chase once again. Don't call it playoffs. Call it the chase if you're going to go that direction. But the one that I mostly prefer, and I think most people prefer at this point, is a full season format. I think the 36 race format is the best way to crown a champion. You have the most legitimate format out there. You can build a season-long storyline because even with the 10-race chase, you can't 100% and 1,000% build the full season storyline. I think the 36 race season is the best way to go at this point because you'll have a season long there. You can build storylines. You can talk about your biggest stars in the sport. And I think that's going to be the way that I think it should happen. I think, unfortunately, though, we could be going to the 4-race round, and I think the 4-race round is just a tweak. It's not perfect by any way, shape, or form, and it won't be the best way to crown a champion. I think you have to go with our 10-race chase or go full season. But you're going to make a lot of people mad that we're hoping for a full season, and you're going to make a lot of those people that are fans of playoffs not very happy either. So it's really just unfortunate exactly what NASCAR is going to do. As Jared mentioned in his video, I don't really envy the position that NASCAR is in when it comes to stuff like this. I do hope we go to the full season, but if we go to 10-race chase, it's not the end of the world in my opinion. I wouldn't be mad about it, but again, I hope we go to full season because again, I think that's the best way to crown a champion. Hopefully that happens, and I hope we do go to full season because again, I think that's the best way in general to crown a champion in the sport, in my opinion. I hope that's the case and hope that's what we end up doing. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're doing a little bit of a silly season update / silly season checkup. Now, there's been some interesting stuff that was talked about on Door Bumper Clear this past week. They had Jordan Bianchi on the most recent Door Bumper Clear podcast, and there were some interesting things that were talked about on the Cup Series side and the Xfinity Series side at this point. Beginning with Justin Haley. There's been some unknowns on what's going to happen with Justin Haley for the 2026 season. Tommy Baldwin actually did mention there potentially could be a new opening for a 5th Kaulig truck for next year. It does sound like that Justin Haley may not even be running full-time in 2026 because there really isn't a ton of options at this point. We are going to talk about Kaulig Racing or just a little bit, talk about the news that broke from this path today on them likely not returning to, or actually confirming they won't be back in the Xfinity Series next year. But Justin Haley could be part-time with Kaulig in the Craftsman Truck Series in the All-Star Truck. It sounds like they're going to have 4 full-time trucks with 4 different drivers and 1 truck that's not going to have a full-time driver for next year. Though Spire Motorsports has been rumored also potentially to have an Xfinity Series program for next year. Tommy Baldwin did mention that is actually a possibility that Spire could have an Xfinity Series program for 26. Those talks are kind of down a little bit early in the year, but it sounds like that maybe Spire could be buying some of the Kaulig Racing stuff going into next year from what I've heard. And it sounds like maybe they could have a 1 or 2 car program next year, but I'm not exactly sure how many races they're going to run if they're going to have a program because they did have an Xfinity program back in 2023. But I do think that Spire could potentially have a 3rd car, at least some stuff in Xfinity, which I think you need to fill that gap with certain teams maybe not being in the series next year. You got to fill that gap in some way, shape, or form. Moving on to some of the other teams. Let's begin with Hendrick Motorsports. Jordan Bianchi did confirm something that we do expect. Corey Day is expected to go full-time in the number 17 car for Hendrick Motorsports in 2026. This is not shocking. They've been running that 17 car quite a bit so far in 2025, and I think they're already preparing that car to get prepared for 2026. So I do 100% believe that Corey Day will be full-time. Corey Day, in my opinion, has shown quite a bit of improvement with Hendrick Motorsports this season. I think he's had a really strong year. And not a really strong year, but he's been starting to show improvement. Had a really good run at Las Vegas. Had a top 15 finish at Martinsville, although he did get into Ryan Sieg, and he did get into other drivers throughout the event. But I think Corey Day will get better as the year goes on. I think he does have a lot of promise, and in my opinion, a ton of potential as well to be really good next season. So I do think Corey Day will be a playoff contender for sure, or whatever the format is. He'll probably be a contender for the top 10 in points by the end of the year, and I think there's a chance he might get a win. Moving on to Joe Gibbs Racing, it sounds like the lineup is going to be very similar, where Taylor Gray, William Swalch, and Brandon Jones are all expected to be back with the program in 2026. However, they do mention, it was kind of brought up by Freddie, that Brent Cruz more than likely will be in the Xfinity Series next year once he turns 18. There's been a lot of speculation that once Brent turns 18 in March, he will be full-time with Joe Gibbs Racing. Brent has been getting a lot better. The kid has a lot of talent. He has a bright future, in my opinion. He probably should have a win or two in the Craftsman Truck Series so far, and I think he's been doing a really, really good job this season with Tricon, especially over the last couple races, and some of those races with the finishes with Tricon, he probably should have gotten better finishes than he got. But I think Brent is a very talented young driver, and I think he does have a lot of capabilities, where I think he will be a championship contender once he does turn 18. I think he's going to pick it up quickly, and when you look at the road courses, for example, him versus Connor Zolj and even Shane Van Gisbergen in some of those races, that's going to be cinema, and it's going to be fun to watch. So going back to Hendrick, sounds like for all the Hendrick drivers, they're going to be in the 88 car on a part-time basis. We know Raj is going to drive the majority of races in that car. He will also drive for Jordan Anderson in select races next year. But then, of course, you'll have all the other Hendrick drivers drive the 88 when Raj is not racing. That, of course, will be Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, William Byron, Alex Bowman. All of them are going to split that car in 2026. There's some other things they kind of talked about that are kind of unknown at this point. They said 2027 silly season, every single team will have a driver that's in a contract year on the Cup side of things. In Xfinity too, it sounds like 20 Xfinity contracts are going to be up and 17 Cup contracts might be up. Majority of the field next year will be in a contract year. It'll be something definitely to watch for sure on the silly season side of things. Like people like myself cover it. We'll talk about all that stuff in the future. They didn't mention anything really about trucks, which is kind of unfortunate. We didn't get any indication of what's going to happen with trucks, but it sounds like some things might be happening down there. And once more gets confirmed on that, we'll probably talk about it on the channel. But I think there's some big things that might be happening with that here in the not-so-distant future. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing. As they have confirmed in the last day or so and confirmed earlier today, writing a thank you post to Kaulig Racing's NASCAR Xfinity Series program. And it's been confirmed by many reporters in the industry that Kaulig Racing will not be back in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2026 and will pause their NASCAR Xfinity Series program at the conclusion of this weekend at Phoenix Raceway. The big reason why Kaulig Racing will not be back in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2026, the biggest reason being is because of their Truck Series program. Remember, Kaulig Racing will be going to Ram in 2026. They will be the Ram team into 2026 year. And rumblings and speculation is that their deal with ECR is officially going to be done at the conclusion of this season. So their main focus is going to be having 5 full-time trucks next year, 4 full-time drivers behind a wheel, which we'll talk about here in just a second, and 1 truck that will be an all-star truck for next year, filled up with a lot of different drivers next season. But thinking about this for Kaulig Racing, look, I think this move for them, it was pretty much time for it to happen. Their program over the course of the last couple of years has not been really the same. They were a team that were on the rise in the Xfinity Series. We all remember how strong they were coming up. They got wins in 2019 with Justin Haley and AJ Allmendinger. They won races in 2020. They almost won with Ross Chastain. And they, in fact, I think they did win with Ross Chastain in 2019, I'm pretty sure. In 2020, they won some races with AJ Allmendinger. They also won races with Justin Haley that year, and Justin Haley made the Final Four. Then in 2021, they had a very strong year. All 3 of their full-time guys went to victory lane. AJ Allmendinger won the regular season title and had a really good shot to win the championship. They had a really good year with Jeb Burton, who picked up the win at Talladega. And then, of course, they picked up some wins with Justin Haley that year, and Haley made, I believe, the round of 8 that season. They had a really good run. And then things kind of started going downhill starting in 22. And then 2024 is where things kind of started falling off. They brought Shane Van Gisbergen in, who picked up 3 road course wins, but Junior Motorsports program got quicker, and AJ Allmendinger failed to win a race on a road course in 2024, which is like the first time since like 2018, or I'm pretty sure. And then, of course, in 2025, they just have not looked good and are likely going to go winless for the first time they've ever gone winless. So I think this move, it was inevitably going to happen. They will have their Cup Series program for next year. They're going to keep the same lineup in 26. That means that Ty Dillon and AJ Allmendinger are going to stay in their respective rides next season. The big question to look at is the Truck Series. We obviously know that Brendan Butterbean Queen is expected, and which has already been confirmed, he'll be full-time with the Kaulig Racing team at 26, with the numbers still being unknown at this time frame. But who's going to be in the other trucks? Well, it sounds like Christian Eckes and Daniel Dye will be in the Craftsman Truck Series next year. They're moving up from Xfinity and going back down to the Truck Series. Christian Eckes, in my opinion, he's going to be a championship contender next year with Kaulig Racing. I expect the Ram trucks to be really good from Kaulig. They're going to get a lot of help from Dodge on that front. and I do think that he'll be really strong and very competitive next year. We know Christian's a really good driver in trucks. I know things have not gone well for him in the Xfinity Series this year, but I do believe Christian Eckes is going to probably be fast and really competitive in 2026. For Daniel Dye last year, when he drove in trucks, he was definitely pretty competitive, was starting to show a lot more consistent pace and speed, and I think he did a really solid, a really good job behind the wheel in the second half of the year and nearly won a couple races in trucks. The other truck, there's been a lot of unknowns on that. Daniel Hemrick's name continues to be mentioned as a possibility. There's been rumors about Grant Enfinger potentially being a candidate for that seat. We talked about Tony Breidinger. She might be in the All-Star truck next year. She might not be full-time in the Craftsman Truck Series next year. There's been rumblings of Cletus McFarland potentially being the candidate, though I don't know if that's going to probably happen next year. That's unknown at this point if that will happen. But looking at Kaulig Racing, I think this team does have a bright future. Maybe when the Ram program comes in or the Dodge program goes in to Xfinity, because we all know that Kaulig Racing more than likely is going to be in the Xfinity Series, is going to probably go back Xfinity Racing. Maybe they run a few part-time select races next year, but I just don't think that's going to happen right now. I don't think that they're going to be in Xfinity any way, shape, or form. I think that they're shuttering it all together, and it's unfortunate to see a competitive team. What does this mean for the Kaulig stuff, though, and the Kaulig equipment? I would expect that Kaulig Racing is going to sell off some of their stuff over to Spire Motorsports, because Spire did sell some of their trucks over to Kaulig Racing, so I would expect that probably they will give some of their Xfinity stuff over to Spire Motorsports next year, and maybe some other teams could potentially expand. There's some unknowns and rumors about AM Racing switching to Chevrolet. Maybe they get a second car next year, but I think you need some competitive teams out there at this point. With the Chevy side, considering Ford is unknown what's going to happen with them at this point, but I think Kaulig Racing having no program next year in Xfinity is going to be really unfortunate. There's some unknowns also with some other teams in the Craftsman Truck Series and what's going to happen over there, but I think for Kaulig, it's sad to see him leaving Xfinity. It was kind of unfortunately expected, though, and I hate that for it because I think the Xfinity Series, losing a team like Kaulig, that's going to be a couple competitive rides. Even if they have been the most competitive, it's going to suck to see a couple competitive rides be gone officially now. So that sucks to see. They're shutting the program down. Unfortunately, it sucks that it will no longer be existing in the Xfinity Series next year. It will put their full focus to trucks and, of course, the Cup Series going forward into the future. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about the 2311 Racing Farmer Motorsports and NASCAR lawsuit. Now, I was originally going to talk about all the stuff that came out on Monday going into early Tuesday, but we had some pretty big updates in regards to the 2311 Racing and Farmer Motorsports over the last day or so. Beginning with an article that came out from Jordan Bianchi. We talked about this on the channel earlier today, but it sounds like the chances of a settlement happening between NASCAR and 2311 Racing and Farmer Motorsports, it actually seems to be increasing. It sounds like some NASCAR executives like Steve Phelps are really trying to push for a settlement at this point, and they're hoping to have a settlement done by the end of this week with it. They talked about the settlement talks and talked about the settlement conference that took place. It turns out that there was a lot of positive momentum, at least in the first day of the settlement. They actually agreed on having permanent charters, which is something that 2311 Racing and Farmer Motorsports have been really wanting and pushing at this point. It sounds like NASCAR is actually giving in, and they want to get the permanent charters put in place for stability and growth. They also agreed that 2311 Racing and Farmer Motorsports, with the settlement, would be able to get their charters back. Remember, NASCAR took their charters away, and the judge said they could take their charters away, which NASCAR said they'd be able to get those back. And he also said that they were going, well, it's once they got to the financial side of things and how the finances are going to work on day number 2, that's when things fell through. But it seems like there is a pretty big push to get a settlement done at this point from NASCAR. And I think there's a big reason why. Earlier today, it was announced that Judge Kenneth Bell has dismissed NASCAR's counterclaim. NASCAR's counterclaim insisted that people, when it came to the charter negotiations going on, that Curtis Polk was mastermind behind a lot of the stuff that was going on, the threats of potential boycotts happening, and basically were not wanting, and basically that they were trying to boycott the sport and create potential other issues that were coming into play. The judge pretty much said that it was absolute nonsense and wasn't a big fan of that. The fact that there actually is some talk of a settlement happening is actually a little bit of some good news at this point. As much as someone like me loves covering this lawsuit, though I'm not the biggest fan of covering this suit, as much as a lawsuit does, and we talk about, does create some viewership on my channel. At the same time, I think for stability of the sport, a settlement does need to be reached. It's no secret that there's a lot of people in the industry that are very concerned right now if they do go to trial. Now, if they don't reach a settlement, potentially by the end of this week, there is a chance they could go to trial. But I think the chance of a settlement might be increased. And the fact that there's many industry members, at least 8 to 9 industry members saying that they feel like there's a chance of a settlement happening, I think that's what's best for the sport right now. And I think a big reason why NASCAR doesn't want to go to trial, the biggest reason is they do not want to open up their books. That's the biggest thing they don't want to happen right now. They don't want to open up their books at this point and show all the financial side of things. We've already seen some of the nasty texts that we have seen from NASCAR in 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. We've seen certain things that have been said, and a lot of people have not been very happy about the things that have been said, and you have some people in the industry that don't have the trust of NASCAR currently at the moment, in 2011 and Front Row at the moment as well. There's a team executive that actually came out and said that 2311 Racing and Front Row, they want to bring stability to the sport, and they want to fix things. Well, they're getting permanent charters, and it doesn't seem like that even then they're not stopping at it. So do they want to really help the sport grow? And I think that person does bring up a very, very good point. But again, the fact that there is actually a chance of a settlement happening, I think that's some really good news, and I think that's news that a lot of people want to hear. I don't really want to go to trial at this point. And if I'm NASCAR, I don't want to go to trial either. I like to get this whole thing settled and resolved at this point, and we'll have to wait and see if there is a settlement reached. If there is a settlement that is officially reached, because again, a settlement has still not been officially reached at this point, but if a settlement does end up getting reached, I think that is the best thing that could happen for the sport. However, if a settlement is not reached between NASCAR and 2011 and Front Row Motorsports, they will go to trial in December. The trial starts on December 1st, and will open up a lot of things, and there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be revealed. I think a lot of people rather than not go to trial at this point, but like I said, the chances of that happening are still potential, but I think we're finally getting to a point where settlement may happen, and both sides might agree to it at this point. Again, the biggest thing is a counterclaim being dismissed is why I think NASCAR is opening to it, because NASCAR, they'll basically be the only ones on the hot seat, and a lot of things will be focused toward NASCAR, and NASCAR doesn't want to open up their books at this point. So we'll see if a settlement is in fact end up being reached. I'm not sure if it will be reached, but the chances of it happening are increasing, and I hope it is reached, because I think that's the best thing for the sport currently at the moment, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story in today's episode, as we're talking about Sam Mayer. Now, we talked about the story on the channel earlier today, but it was officially announced and confirmed as expected that Sam Mayer has been suspended for the NASCAR Xfinity Series race this upcoming weekend at Phoenix Raceway. Ryan Sieg is going to drive the number 41 car in substitution for Sam Mayer this weekend. Kyle Sieg is going to drive the number 39 this weekend, and while nothing's been officially confirmed on the number 28 car at this point, one of the rumors that is circulating at the moment is Nick Lights, who of course is driven for SS Greenlight Racing, maybe driving a number 28 car this week, and he put the looking emoji on Twitter, I'm pretty sure, basically indicating maybe there's potential possibility I'm doing it, but nothing's been officially announced at this point. Obviously, the big reason why Sam Mayer was suspended is because of what he did at Martinsville. Now, Sam Mayer and Jeb Burton had gotten into it throughout the day, and they both were not big fans of each other throughout the race. It all started near the end of stage number 1 with about 20 laps to go in the first stage. Sam Mayer got into Jeb Burton, forced him up the racetrack, got really, really wide, and Sam got the position ahead of him. Sam Mayer definitely had a guy like Jeb Burton who was not very happy with him at that point. Jeb Burton said, I don't care about his championship at this point. I'm going to get back to make sure his championship gets affected. Throughout the race, then, there would be contact between them multiple times on the track. Jeb Burton would actually force Sam Mayer up the racetrack at least once or twice, and Jeb Burton at times would come down the racetrack and not give Sam Mayer a ton of room. Once the race had officially got done, there would be, unfortunately, an incident that would take place after the race concluded, where Sam Mayer intentionally would wreck Jeb Burton after the race had concluded and would right rear him into the outside wall, getting a ton of damage on his car. You could tell that Jeb Burton was not very happy about the incident on the racetrack, and Jordan Anderson, the car owner of the number 27 machine, was very livid about it and went up to confront Sam Mayer on the incident. And things didn't help matters when Sam Mayer went on a little bit of a rant. Seemed like he crashed out against Jeb Burton and basically kind of said what he wanted to say. He did apologize to Jordan Anderson about what happened on the racetrack, saying, I feel bad for Jordan in this situation because they have to build the cars. He's really happy to see the success of Jordan Anderson Racing, but he basically said that Jeb Burton doesn't have the it factor. He has the shit factor, speaking to the members, and says that Jeb doesn't really have it at this point. It is just annoying, basically fast enough to be annoying on the racetrack and doesn't really do much with, despite the fact that Jeb Burton did actually finish better than Sam Mayer in the race. But I digress. Now, looking at the situation and incident on the racetrack, I'm not saying that Jeb Burton is completely innocent, but to me, Sam Mayer is the one who initiated the contact and started the incident on the racetrack. Sam Mayer is the one who began everything. And throughout the night, and Dale Jr. brought this up on a Dale Jr. download early today, he said that Sam Mayer was the one who was being extremely aggressive throughout the night and making a lot of these moves. So for Sam Mayer to get entirely mad at Jeb Burton about it, he got into a lot of people throughout the night, and there were a lot of people that weren't the biggest fan of Sam Mayer's antics on the racetrack. And Sam Mayer's justification for the incident by saying, well, Jeb Burton causing a ton of wrecks at Talladega, that doesn't justify you going and wrecking Jeb Burton. If you're mad about Talladega, you should have gone and confronted him after race and talked to Jeb Burton after race. You can't just go intentionally wreck the guy after race is over. That's unacceptable. NASCAR has to put their foot down on situations like this. And I think NASCAR absolutely 100% made the right call in this situation. Just think about this for a second. We've seen NASCAR basically suspend drivers for intentionally wrecking. We saw this with Bubba Wallace getting suspended after Vegas for intentionally wrecking Kyle Larson. And Christopher getting collected in that incident. Bubba got suspended at Homestead. Chase Elliott got suspended at Gateway for intentionally wrecking Denny Hamlin at the Coca-Cola 600, right rearing him in the outside wall. And then we saw Austin Hill earlier this year get suspended for intentionally wrecking Eric Almirola near the end of the race at Indianapolis. NASCAR has to set a precedent, and the biggest reason why I think it's much more egregious what Sam Mayer did, NASCAR had a meeting with all the drivers before the race happened. They basically told all the drivers that we're only going to accept a certain way because of what happened early in the spring, where the race was really chaotic and a lot of drivers were getting taken out. You had a lot of the undeserved driving. You had Sammy Smith intentionally wreck Taylor Gray on the white flag of the event, and NASCAR was not very happy about that. And NASCAR was wanting and hoping that drivers would actually behave. And for the most part, the drivers actually did behave. It was just this situation where Sam Mayer couldn't keep his head on straight and didn't do a really good job behind the wheel. And I think Sam Mayer 100% deserves suspension. Going in substitution for this week, Ryan Sieg's getting a great opportunity. I believe he's making his 400th career NASCAR Xfinity Series start this weekend. He's going to have the best chance he ever had in his career to go to victory lane. I think he's going to have a good shot. We've seen Ryan Sieg be really competitive. The 41 car is quintessentially the 98 car. Remember, the 98 car went to victory lane with Riley Herbst. So I think that car will be really fast and strong with Ryan Sieg this week, and I think he's going to be really good and really competitive for sure. A phenomenal opportunity, and I expect him to be really good this weekend. But for Sam Mayer, he gets a little bit of an early vacation, and I think this is 100% a justified penalty and the right call. Sam's now going to have an offseason to think about what he did and not justifying his actions. I think it was the right call that NASCAR made. I think they had to suspend Sam Mayer for the incident. It was a right call, the good call in my opinion, and I think, again, NASCAR made the right call to go ahead and suspend Sam Mayer. You can't just intentionally wreck somebody after race because you're upset about getting hit. I think NASCAR made the right and justified call overall, in my honest opinion. So, that's good for today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's get some more of that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think that the NASCAR made the right call on Sam Mayer getting suspended? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think the settlement will be reached between NASCAR 2011 Front Row or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Earlier today, I did my championship predictions and who I think will win the championship for the Cup Series. Later today, I'll have the Truck Series race picks for the championship event. Tomorrow, we're going to have the NASCAR Cup Series race picks, and then we'll have the Xfinity Series race picks as well. Then Friday, we'll have a NASCAR news video, and of course, we will have the reactions for the championship race at Phoenix for the Truck Series, and then the same thing for Xfinity and Cup throughout the weekend. Saturday, we're going to have the Cup Series qualifying reactions and the Xfinity Championship. Then Sunday, we'll have the same thing for Star and Line, among other things. And then Monday, we'll have a NASCAR news video dropping on the channel if news breaks throughout the weekend. We got content coming on people like Haley Deegan, Shaman Ginsburg, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bo Wallace, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Frankie Muniz, Clinton Savron, Dodge Ram, Will Brown, Brian Feeney, Cam Waters, Kyle Larson, Chase Lake, Ryan Priest, Connor Zilch, Jr. Motorsports. Talk about all this stuff on the channel in the coming days and coming weeks as well, along with Daniel Suarez too. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.